Dr. Rowe, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and for the group here. I don't know whether you know or not, but I've sponsored a bill called the Desert Storm Desert Shield War Memorial Act, and we're in the process of, hopefully, I'm meeting with Scott Stump in just a little while this week, I think sometime this week, to talk about how we raise the funds for that. But we wanted to do that while it was still on everyone's mind and people forgot about it. I think the question that I have, and as a scientist, and it makes it difficult, when you don't know the etiology of a disease, it's very difficult. You end up treating symptoms, and they may vary. And I've found that one of the great things that used to really bother me when I was in practice was if we didn't know what was wrong with you, we either said it was a virus or you were nervous. I mean, that's basically what you're doing. And I hope we're not doing that here. I don't think so. I think good, honest people have looked at the data. I think it's very, very hard to assimilate this. And a question I have for anybody on the panel, have we looked at the oil workers who put the fires out? Have we looked at the cohorts there in Kuwait right now? There are people that still live in Kuwait that were there. Did they have these symptoms? When we looked at the cohort who were in the service but weren't deployed versus the ones who did, and I think the Institute of Medicine did that. I think that's the cohort they looked at. You have a built-in group of people right there in Kuwait who were there during the war and Iraq, and has anyone who served in the current conflict in Iraq, now that we've been out of there for a while, have they had these symptoms? A lot of questions.
Well, to answer some of your questions, there have been studies on subgroups of people within the Gulf theater who had very specific kinds of exposures. So there's a bunch of research out on the pesticide applicators, and we know a lot about what pesticides they were exposed to, how much, what it did to their health. There is a study that's being done at Harvard that I'm participating in on the Kuwaiti population. The people that were there then do have increased symptoms. We're trying to figure out what it means because the surveys that they used and so on didn't exactly address it the way we would address Gulf War illness. The other point I want to make is that the exposure scenario in the Gulf War theater was very complex, and comparing deployed to undeployed veterans does not always tell you what happened to people who were in specific places with specific kinds of high exposures. So the standard that we tried to ask for on the RAC and in the Cortex paper that I just wrote is looking at people who were deployed to the Gulf, who were exposed versus who were not exposed and who were in certain locations.
Well, you're going to say, because I know probably the chairman, when you're in the military, sometimes you don't know where you are. I know that I have been deployed in places I didn't know where I was. And,
yes.
Matter of fact, I've asked that question. Where are we? I mean, so are you able to pinpoint? That's a great point you made. Can you do a sort of a spotogram where these folks were? Because you're right. Being deployed 100 miles up here might not be the same as being deployed next to a chemical burn.
Yes.
No question, that's true.
So where that data came from, and I used a lot of this data when I was head of an environmental hazard center that was funded by the VA, was we asked for data on what troops were where. And we got troop level data on locations in Gulf, and we used that for some of our research. That's how we knew who was in the area of the Comisia detonations and certain other things. So yes, those data are there. It took a lot of years to get it because it was in paper in a warehouse. But there are data on who was where, at least at the troop level.
At least that's where they think they were supposed to be.
Yes, because not every individual was where their unit was supposed to be either.
That when you get shot at, you're not necessarily where you're supposed to be. You move from that place. So I guess the last question, my time's about expired. But I thank all of you because this is one of the most difficult epidemiologic issues I've ever looked at. Because again, like in Ebola, we knew what caused Ebola. In other diseases like that, where there's a single agent, we know how that goes. We know exactly what an epidemic is going to do. We've followed them for centuries. We know what they're going to do. This is much more difficult because you haven't identified a single agent or multiple agents, or maybe there were one agent here and somebody else was over here. So, and did the treatment contribute to it? I mean, did giving the soldier something to prevent it do anything? So I admire you for trying this. This is one of the most difficult epidemiologic studies I've ever seen. So I yield back.